have to have somebody lead the way, and as a sheriff I would do that, to get all the local agencies together and train in that regard, so that everybody knows when the call goes out, here's the response of the Williamson County Sheriff's Office, here's the response of the Georgetown Police Department, here's the response of the Florence Police Department, here's the response of the Constable's Office, so that we know that when that call goes out, we immediately get response, we get it rapidly, we get it in force, so that everybody's coming that way, and they know who's going to be in charge when they get there. So it's very important that we do that. The schools, who would have ever thought, Mr. Chody's right, who would have ever thought it's a sad day, like I said earlier, that we have to be concerned about our children and our schools because of somebody going in and creating that type of situation and killing our children. So it is important the schools are up to speed on security. I think today they are working very quickly trying to do that, or have gotten to a whole lot better procedures than what they've had before with people coming on their campuses. But for the rest of what is difficult is movie theaters. You're in a movie theater and somebody comes in. Those things you just can't always have every location. Your church. I know the churches today around this community are actively having security meetings. People who have handgun licenses are carrying weapons and things like that into our churches to make sure that if something occurs, that there is some type of immediate response. Most of our churches have police officers in them. Great, because they're sitting there in the crowd, and what a police officer typically will do will react a whole lot quicker than anybody else because he sees the threat, he knows it, and he jumps and takes charge. That's what you want your police officers to do. So that's something, like I said, that I've been campaigning on. I think it's very important to have that plan in place. And so when it happens, there's no, oh, are we supposed to go to that, or can we help, or should we come? No, they know when the call goes out, they're to respond, and that they're in agreement to do so.
Thank you, sir.
Pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing I left out of my response is my overall philosophy when you deal with forward planning and potential hazards and crises, is that you put a plan in place and you work with your environment, your businesses, the people, such that you create an environment here in Williamson County that's one of prevention. You don't create or have situations where you invite crisis. One of the attributes, or one of the variables that's seen across some of these other incidents, is that these things occur in gun-free zones. Maybe we should reevaluate putting up 30-06 and 30-07 signs and let the threats know that somebody's there to protect and that you won't have much chance of success if you actually start this. So we need to incorporate this into our plan, is how do we prevent the actions from even occurring and motivate them to do it in some other county.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we'll go to closing statements. Next one up for lineup is Robert. You have 3 minutes for your closing statements.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come. It's a little difficult. Typically, we have 10 minutes to say something to a group, and even in this environment, you still don't get to know the candidates completely. And all I'm going to ask you is to, as you prepare to make your vote, as I ask for your vote, is to look at each candidate and stay around and listen to us, talk to us, ask your personal questions. But I want you to look at our resumes. We talked about experience, recent experience, and my passion. And when you look at my experience, recent experience, and passion, we've had the same opportunity as candidates to present this to law enforcement associations around the county. And every one of those law enforcement associations, when they heard what we had to say, when they looked at our resume, when they looked at our recent experience and our passion, have chosen to endorse me. That's pretty unique for a 5-person race to get every endorsement from law enforcement as well as public safety officials, such as Georgetown Fire Association, as well as Texas State Senator Schwartner, State Representative Tony Dale. Local leaders within the community have endorsed me because they know the total package of Robert Chody is going to bring the better candidate at the Sheriff's Office. With that said, as you compare those resumes, I heard in another forum where it said, somebody said that, hey, when you compare these resumes, you do that for a job applicant, you'll look at their resume. But what I'm asking you to do is look at the resume, but also call the references. Look at our reputations and see who the best candidate is. And my hope is I'm the best candidate. So with that said, thank you very much.
Randy?
Well, certainly, again, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you today. And as I make my closing statements, first I want to say that all the people sitting up here on this panel are good folks. You know, we've been almost living with each other here for a little while, and you know, we have a little jab here or there, but we're all good folks, and it's certainly been my pleasure to be involved in this process. But what I tell you as I close today is, when you look at the candidates, and I'm the guy who has said, hey, pull the resumes, look at the resumes, and if you were hiring a person, that's one of the first things you would do. And I would certainly ask that you do that. I would love for you to call my references and talk to them. But I think what I bring that's a little different than the other candidates is I'm the only candidate on the ballot that has executive level experience with a large police agency. I've been in a position to make those tough decisions for a large agency. I've dealt with a large budget and had to weigh out what's best for the people we're serving, and where can we cut, and where can we spend a little extra money. I've been involved in tremendous emergency management decision making, as you've heard earlier. Strategic planning. With Williamson County growing at the rate that it is, we need somebody at the helm of this sheriff's office who has an understanding of strategic planning and how to make sure that we are staying ahead from a public safety standpoint of this growth that we're experiencing. Because public safety is one of the most important things to you. Our quality of life here is so good, and we don't want to let that slip. Our schools are good, our hospitals are good, and we want to make sure our public safety is premier to anybody in this state. And that, I just believe that in my whole heart. I live here, this is my community, and I want to make sure it's safe. My vision is to be, as your next sheriff, that I'll be accessible to you. That's one thing I hear, the sheriff won't talk to me. Well, if you want to talk to me, you pick up the phone and call me. I'll make time for you. It may not be right at that second, but we'll schedule something where we get in, because there's only about 500,000 people live here. I couldn't talk to y'all at once, but I'll certainly make time to do so. That we need to keep our streets and neighborhoods safe by aggressively pursuing criminals and drunk drivers. We need to make sure that if bad actors want to come to Williamson County, they understand they're going to be held accountable. That they're not going to come up here and commit crimes and just walk off. That we will hold them accountable for that. We need to make sure that that department is organizationally structured in a manner that it operates in the most effective and efficient way that it possibly can. And we need to make sure that our employees are paid at the rate to keep them in place, but also to create a work environment for them where they're happy to come to work every day. And that's a doable solution, and it doesn't cost us anything to make that happen. We also need to make sure that we're working with the Commissioner's Court to ensure we have proper funding to have the number of deputies that we need. My experience with the state legislature, working with the House Appropriations, Senate Finance, and the Governor's Office to get multi-million-dollar packages through, and certainly I can bring that to work each day for the Commissioner's Court.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bill?
I kind of find it interesting that the comparison between a large police organization is so significantly different than a large military organization in terms of management and strategic planning. The size of the organization I dealt with many years ago was roughly double the size of what Mr. Elston's organization is. And in terms of working with large numbers and budgets, his is a couple $100 million. The budgets I work with in DOD is in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So looking at relative size, you make the decision and what kind of difference there is in managing highly trained military people versus highly trained police or DEA or NCIS. You can make that decision. Do look at the resumes, but don't just look at the resumes. Also go back and look at the fundamental characters of the people that you have as well. See what they looked like many years ago. Even as a young kid, when I was only 18 in college, I interposed myself in a situation in Columbus, Georgia, to save a young black child's life when he was being surrounded by a mob. And the thing that got me through that was actually prayer, and there's more to that story. But go look at the reasons too why these people want to be a sheriff. Go inquire as to their actual reasoning. I've made mine clear more than a year ago, but I'm coming back to put our country, our county back on course relative to the fundamentals of the Constitution and the underlying biblical principles. Look at the other individuals too. Mr. Ellison is highly qualified. Why did he get into the race 4 hours before the deadline? He's been retired for a few years, and if the Sheriff's Department was really having these problems, why wasn't he at the forefront of fixing it? With Mr. Chody's resources, why didn't he go ahead and follow the state guidelines? If he wanted to really be sheriff, why didn't he resign as constable and actually run for sheriff openly? So look at the fundamental characters that you have in front of you. Mr. Cowie is a wonderful person too. He had no dreams of sheriff till the exiting sheriff tapped him on the shoulder. So look at me. I am running for sheriff to serve you. The important thing is that when you evaluate why you're going to vote for someone, don't look at just the next career step for someone or the fact that someone might want to be sheriff. When you go to the polls and vote, your decision is not for us. Your decision is for our future generations, our grandchildren. And I'm not going to be a politician and say things like politicians say, because I'm not a politician. I'm not going to say I appreciate your vote. The reality is your grandchildren is going to appreciate your vote, because who you choose is going to provide the fundamental guidelines for their future.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, gentlemen. This concludes our candidates' walk.